Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are covering a moment that may redefine how the world views Russia, its leadership, and the idea of power itself. Moscow on fire, the strike that shattered Putin's image. This is not just another dramatic headline. This is not just about flames, smoke, or damaged buildings. This is about perception, pride, and power, and how all three collided in the heart of Russia's capital. What happened in Moscow has sent shockwaves far beyond the city's borders, shaking confidence inside the Kremlin and forcing the world to rethink what Vladimir Putin's rule truly represents. For decades, Moscow has been portrayed as untouchable, a fortress city, the safest place in Russia, protected by layers of air defenses, intelligence agencies, internal security forces, and military power. It was the physical symbol of Putin's promise that under his rule, Russia would be strong, stable, and secure. That promise has now been violently challenged. When fire reaches the capital, it reaches the mind of the nation. Moscow is not just a city. It is the stage on which Russian power performs. It is where authority lives, where decisions are made, where the myth of control is constantly reinforced. When that stage burns, the performance collapses. For Vladimir Putin, image has always been everything. From the very beginning of his rise to power, he cultivated the image of a man who restored order after chaos, a leader who ended instability, a protector who brought Russia back from humiliation. Strength, discipline, and control became the pillars of his identity. But images are fragile, and today, the images coming out of Moscow tell a very different story. Flames lighting the night sky, smoke rising over landmarks associated with power. Emergency sirens echoing through streets once meant to symbolize absolute security. These visuals do not just show destruction, they broadcast vulnerability. And vulnerability is something authoritarian systems fear more than anything. Putin's leadership has always depended on a simple but powerful message: I can protect you. That message justified everything else: repression, censorship, economic sacrifice, isolation from the world. Russians were told that freedom could be traded for security, and that trade was worth it. But when Moscow burns, the trade collapses. Inside Russia, this moment hits harder than battlefield losses or economic sanctions, because it strikes the core belief that the system works, that the leader knows what he's doing, that the state is competent. And once people begin to doubt competence, fear starts to change direction. Instead of fearing external enemies, people begin to fear the system itself. For years, Russian state media insisted that threats existed only at the edges. Conflict could happen far away. Instability could be exported elsewhere. But Moscow would remain calm, controlled, and protected. That illusion is now gone. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. Ordinary citizens may not take to the streets immediately. Authoritarian fear is deeply ingrained. But doubt does not need protests to spread. It spreads quietly, through conversations at home, messages sent privately, questions asked in whispers. How did this happen? Who failed? If Moscow is not safe, then what is? These questions are dangerous because they cannot be easily answered with propaganda. For the Kremlin elite, the situation is even more alarming. Power in Russia is not just political, it is personal. Wealth, privilege, and survival are tied directly to proximity to Putin. Loyalty is rewarded, but only as long as the leader appears strong. The moment strength is questioned, loyalty becomes conditional. Behind closed doors, calculations begin. Officials wonder who will be blamed. Security chiefs worry about purges. Military leaders fear becoming scapegoats. Intelligence agencies scramble to protect themselves. This is how internal decay begins. History shows us that authoritarian regimes rarely collapse because of popular uprisings alone. They collapse when the elite fractures, when insiders lose faith, when those closest to power start thinking about life after the leader, Moscow on Fire accelerates that process. Internationally, the strike has shattered assumptions. Russia projected itself as a power capable of controlling escalation, deterring attacks, and maintaining absolute security at home. That image influenced diplomacy, alliances, and military planning across the globe. Now that image is damaged, allies begin to question reliability, rivals reassess risk, neutral countries reconsider their positions. Influence fades quietly, not with explosions, but with hesitation. Power depends on credibility, and credibility is hard to rebuild once broken. For Putin personally, this moment is deeply humiliating. Strongmen fear humiliation more than defeat. Defeat can be explained away. Humiliation is visible, it sticks. It invites challenge. Putin's entire political persona is built around control. Control of territory, control of narrative, control of people. Fire in Moscow represents a failure of control in its most symbolic form. The Kremlin will try to manage the fallout. There will be investigations, official statements, carefully worded explanations, media blackouts, arrests for spreading panic. All the familiar tools of control will be deployed. But control has limits. Images cannot be unseen. Fear cannot be fully suppressed. Once people know that the center can be reached, the psychological barrier is broken. This moment also exposes the dangers of centralized decision-making. When one man holds too much power, systems stop correcting themselves. Bad news is hidden, warnings are ignored, reality is filtered through loyalty rather than truth. Over time, the leader becomes isolated, not physically, but intellectually. Surrounded by people who tell him what he wants to hear, protected from inconvenient facts, trapped inside his own narrative. Eventually, reality breaks through, and when it does so violently. Moscow on Fire is reality breaking through. For ordinary Russians, the future now feels uncertain in a new way. Economic pressure is already intense. Sanctions have reshaped daily life. Opportunities are shrinking. Now even the promise of safety feels unreliable. Fear changes behavior. People become cautious. They save instead of spend. They plan exits instead of futures. They lose faith in long-term stability. This quiet shift can be more damaging than open rebellion. For Putin, the challenge ahead is enormous. He cannot easily escalate without risking further instability. He cannot easily de-escalate without appearing weak. Every option carries risk. Strongmen survive crises by projecting strength. But what happens when the crisis itself exposes weakness? This is the paradox Putin now faces. The Kremlin's pride was built over decades. Carefully, ruthlessly, through force, fear, and narrative control. One strike does not destroy a system, but it can shatter an image, and images matter. This moment will be studied by historians, analysts, and future leaders. Not as the day everything ended, but as the day something changed. The day Moscow burned. The day the illusion of invulnerability cracked. The day Putin's image was no longer unquestioned. What comes next is uncertain. And uncertainty is the most dangerous enemy of authoritarian power. Because once people realize that power is not absolute, possibilities open up, possibilities no regime can fully control. This is not just a story about fire. It is a story about pride, perception, and the fragile nature of authority built on fear. Moscow on Fire was not just a strike on a city. It was a strike on an image, and that image may never fully recover. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next video.